Ladies and gentlemen, this is Intervlog. I said, this is Intervlog, the channel where we dive deep into the stories shaping our world today. And wow, what a fascinating story we have before us. A story about leadership, popularity, international politics, and the way narratives can shift in the global media space. Today, we begin with a recognition that even some of the biggest and most established voices in global journalism have made. The BBC has openly acknowledged that Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso is not just a rising figure, but one whose popularity across Africa and beyond rivals the global charisma of none other. That is no small comparison. The BBC, a media powerhouse known for its global reach and influence, has placed Traoré on a stage few African leaders have been invited to in recent decades. This recognition is remarkable for a number of reasons. First, it shows how deeply Traoré's message has resonated far beyond his own borders. We are talking about a 37-year-old leader who, in just a few years, has become a central figure in Africa's conversation about independence, sovereignty, and the right to chart one's own future without external dictates. To see the BBC acknowledge this is to see mainstream media admit that something profound is happening in Burkina Faso and across Africa. Second, this recognition comes against the backdrop of skepticism and even hostility from other global actors. Not long ago, U.S. General Michael Langley accused Traoré of stealing gold from his own people, painting a negative picture of a leader many Africans were beginning to see as a champion of sovereignty. Yet in a fascinating twist, we have just witnessed Langley himself appear to soften his stance. In a sit-down interview on Kenyan television with respected journalist Yvonne Okwara, the same General Langley, who once fired verbal shots at Burkina Faso, seemed to dial down the heat. His words were measured, almost cautious. He noted, "There are a lot of great things going on in Burkina Faso to progress them forward." That statement alone is a remarkable shift. It signals not just a personal recalibration by Langley, but a broader recognition that the story of Traoré cannot simply be reduced to negative sound bites. Something more is happening, something so undeniable that even critics have had to acknowledge it. Intervlog sees this as a moment worth pausing on. Because in the world of international politics, narratives do not shift lightly. When a global broadcaster like the BBC takes the time to analyze and publish insights on Traoré's popularity, and when a top-ranking U.S. general begins to soften his tone, it tells us that we are witnessing a leader whose impact has forced even the most skeptical voices to rethink their positions. Think of it like this. A tree may be planted in rocky ground, but when its roots grow deep enough and its branches spread wide enough, even those who doubted its survival must admit that it has flourished. Traoré is that tree, emerging in difficult circumstances, challenged from all sides, yet finding ways to grow in stature, influence, and symbolic power. BBC's coverage highlights something essential. Traoré has not only captured the imagination of Burkinabe citizens, but also the admiration of people far beyond West Africa. He is seen as bold, charismatic, and unapologetically pan-Africanist. In their reporting, the BBC drew attention to the comparisons being made between him and Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's legendary revolutionary leader who inspired generations with his courage, simplicity, and vision of an independent Africa. This is not about ideology alone. It is about symbolism. Sankara was called Africa's Che Guevara, and now Traoré is being described in similar terms. That is no small feat. The BBC, by drawing these lines of comparison, is giving the world a lens through which to understand why so many are rallying behind this young leader. At Intervlog, we often say, when the drumbeat changes, the dance must change. The drumbeat in Africa's political and cultural life is indeed changing, and the BBC has recognized that. For decades, stories about African leaders in Western media often followed a predictable script, either about failure, corruption, or instability. But in Traoré's case, the story is different. His rise has forced even seasoned observers to ask, why is this young man resonating so widely? Why do so many see him as the embodiment of a new African spirit? And that brings us back to General Langley's U-turn. In politics, rare are the moments when critics openly walk back their earlier hardline positions. Langley's acknowledgment that great things are happening in Burkina Faso may seem like a small phrase, but in truth, it is the verbal equivalent of a door creaking open. It suggests the beginning of a shift in perspective, or at the very least, an acceptance that Traoré's popularity is not a passing fad. This is why Intervlog chooses to open this discussion here, with the BBC's recognition and Langley's recalibration. Because it is in these moments that the global narrative shifts. Leaders become more than just heads of state. They become symbols. And symbols, once established, are hard to erase. As we continue this exploration, we will dive deeper into why Ibrahim Traoré has captured the hearts and minds of millions. We will look at his policies, his international stance, the role of social media, and the historic parallels with figures like Thomas Sankara. We will also acknowledge the criticisms, the challenges, and the complex realities he faces. But for now, let us appreciate this moment. The BBC recognizing Traoré's popularity on par with Donald Trump, and General Langley softening his stance after once being one of his sharpest critics. If a river carves through stone not by power, but by persistence, then Traoré's persistence in his message is beginning to carve its place into the global narrative. Why has a 37-year-old leader from a landlocked West African country become the talk of Africa and beyond? Why do people from Nairobi to Lagos, from Johannesburg to New York, speak his name with admiration, debate his policies, and share his speeches across social media as though he were a global rock star? The answer lies not just in politics, but in something deeper: charisma, courage, and the ability to voice the frustrations and aspirations of millions. Traoré speaks in a language that resonates with the heart. When he talks about freedom from neo-colonial control, about the need for Africans to take ownership of their resources, and about the dignity of self-reliance, he is touching chords that run through Africa's collective memory. He is saying out loud what many have whispered for decades. And as the BBC highlighted, his message is not confined to Burkina Faso. It echoes across the continent. Political analysts, authors, and even everyday citizens have pointed to him as the man, the one who symbolizes a break from the old order. In Kenya, in South Africa, in Ghana, and across the African diaspora, his words feel like a torch in the darkness. Let's pause here for a parable. Imagine a village where the people have lived under the same landlord for generations. The landlord takes the best harvests, leaves little for the farmers, and demands loyalty in return for protection. Over time, the villagers grow tired. They want change, but no one dares to speak. Then one day, a young farmer stands up in the town square and says, "These fields are ours. This soil is ours. We will no longer be slaves on our own land." His voice is steady, his youth undeniable, his courage inspiring. Suddenly the silence is broken, and the villagers rally around him. That farmer is Traoré. That village is Africa. This is why he has captured hearts and minds. He embodies the courage to say what others have long felt. His style of leadership is equally important. He does not dress like a distant statesman. He often appears in simple military fatigues, like a soldier among soldiers, a man among his people. This image has been carefully built, but it is also authentic to who he is. It is reminiscent of Thomas Sankara, who rode bicycles and played the guitar, who lived simply while calling for radical transformation. Africans love leaders who appear humble, approachable, and close to the people. Another reason for his wide appeal is the sense of generational change he represents. Burkina Faso is a young country, with a median age of under 18. Much of Africa is the same: young, restless, impatient with old systems that have failed to deliver jobs, education, or hope. Traoré, at 37, is young enough to reflect the aspirations of this demographic. He is not seen as part of the old guard. He is the face of a new generation claiming its place at the table. Parable again. When a fire burns too long in the hearth, the ashes cover the wood, and the flame begins to die. It is only when fresh wood is added that the fire bursts alive again. In Africa's political hearth, Traoré is that fresh wood. He has reignited a flame that many thought was dying, a flame of hope, of courage, of belief in African destiny. His words are also powerful because they link personal struggles with collective struggles. At the Russia-Africa Summit in 2023, he called on leaders to stop behaving like puppets pulled by imperial strings. That image of puppets dancing to an external master was so sharp, so vivid, that it spread like wildfire. Africans everywhere nodded, laughed, and shared it. It was relatable, it was powerful, and it was true. His popularity is not only about his speeches, it is also about the timing of his message. He rose at a moment when dissatisfaction with Western influence was peaking. For decades, foreign aid, military interventions, and multinational corporations had promised progress but left much of Africa still struggling with poverty. Social media amplified every frustration. Into this environment stepped Traoré, a man with simple words, fiery rhetoric, and uncompromising vision. He became the lightning rod for all those feelings. The diaspora, too, has rallied around him. Africans in the US, in the UK, in France, see in him a symbol of resistance. Even those who have never visited Burkina Faso find themselves sharing his quotes, posting his photos, and treating him as an emblem of African pride. Everyone who has experienced racism, colonialism, or slavery can relate to his messages, as Beverly Ochieng told the BBC. That is why his reach has extended far beyond the Sahel. Consider this. In the age of social media, leaders are no longer confined by geography. A speech delivered in Ouagadougou can be streamed instantly in Johannesburg, replayed in Lagos, and analyzed in New York. Memes, videos, and AI-generated songs spread his image even further. He has become a digital phenomenon as much as a political one. And here's another parable. When the wind blows across the savannah, it does not stop at the boundary of one field. It sweeps through the grasslands, carrying seeds far and wide. Traoré's message is that wind, scattering seeds of pride, defiance, and self-belief across the continent. Whether those seeds take root depends on the soil of each nation, but the wind itself cannot be stopped. There is also the simple fact of courage. Leadership in Africa has too often been marked by compromise, by bending under foreign pressure, by leaders who say one thing at home and another abroad. Traoré has been different. His defiance of France, his embrace of sovereignty, his insistence on national control of resources, all these have painted him as fearless. Africans respect courage, especially when it comes from a leader who seems willing to risk everything for the sake of principle. This is why analysts like Enoch Randy Akins have called him arguably Africa's most popular, if not favorite, president. Whether or not one agrees with his policies, it is hard to deny that he has captured imaginations in a way few leaders have. But popularity is not magic. It is built on resonance, on timing, on symbolism, and on courage. Traoré has woven all these threads together into an image that speaks to millions. So when the BBC places his popularity alongside that of Trump, it is not exaggerating, it is acknowledging the scale of his influence. When General Langley acknowledges great things happening in Burkina Faso, he is recognizing the undeniable appeal Traoré holds. And here is the final parable for this section. The hunter who enters the forest with arrogance may mock the small birds singing in the trees. But when the bird's song echoes through the valley, even the hunter must stop and listen. Traoré's voice, once dismissed by some, now echoes too loudly to ignore. That is why he has captured hearts and minds, not just in Burkina Faso, but around the world. To understand why Captain Ibrahim Traoré resonates so strongly today, we must look back. History is a mirror, and in Burkina Faso that mirror reflects the face of Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara, the young revolutionary who seized power in 1983, at just 33 years old, became known as Africa's Che Guevara. His leadership was brief, only 4 years, but his legacy has endured for decades. Sankara changed the country's name from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meaning land of upright people. He planted millions of trees, fought corruption, promoted women's rights, and spoke unapologetically against Western exploitation. He refused to live lavishly, insisting that leaders must embody the sacrifices they demand of their people. Sankara's action in 1987 left a wound in Burkina Faso's history, a wound that never quite healed. For years, citizens remembered him as the leader who gave them pride, dignity, and a glimpse of a self-reliant future. When Traoré rose to prominence in 2022, comparisons to Sankara came almost immediately. Both were young, both spoke in direct, uncompromising terms. Both challenged external control and called for African nations to stand tall. Both embodied simplicity, courage, and vision. For many, Traoré seemed like the reincarnation of Sankara's unfinished dream. Parable. When a torch is dropped in the middle of a storm, the flame may die. But if a young runner picks it up years later and shields it with his hand, the flame can rise again. Sankara's torch was dropped in 1987. Traoré has picked it up. This historical connection is not just emotional, it is strategic. Traoré understands the power of symbolism. By echoing Sankara's language, by embodying his simplicity, by invoking his legacy, he taps into the deepest reservoir of Burkina Faso's national pride. He presents himself not just as a new leader, but as a continuation of a story that began 4 decades ago. Africans across the continent also recognize this link. Sankara was admired far beyond Burkina Faso. He represented a vision of Africa that was independent, proud, and self-reliant. To see a new leader take up that banner today gives many Africans a sense of continuity. It is as if history has given them a second chance to pursue a dream that was cut short. Internationally, too, this legacy resonates. Analysts and historians see Traoré not in isolation, but as part of a broader African tradition of resistance leaders. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Patrice Lumumba of Congo, Amilcar Cabral of Guinea-Bissau, Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. By standing in that line of history, Traoré is not just a Burkinabe figure, he is part of a continental story. But we must also note the differences. Sankara ruled in a different era, before globalization, before the digital revolution, before social media. His words traveled slowly, by radio, by newspaper, by speeches replayed across the continent. Traoré's words, in contrast, travel instantly. A speech in Ouagadougou can be viewed in Nairobi or Washington within minutes. Social media magnifies his impact, making him not only a political leader, but also a digital symbol. This digital amplification has given his Sankara-like message even greater reach. The parallels are obvious, but the scale of the audience is far larger today. Parable again. Sankara was like a drummer whose beat was carried by the wind. Traoré is like a drummer with a microphone and loudspeakers, his rhythm impossible to ignore. What does this mean for Burkina Faso? It means that Traoré has positioned himself not only as a national leader, but as a custodian of a historical dream. His reforms in mining, his rejection of foreign domination, his embrace of sovereignty, these are not just policies. They are part of a legacy that began with Sankara and continues today. It also means expectations are enormous. Many admire Traoré not only for what he has already done, but for what they hope he will do. And expectations, like shadows, can sometimes grow longer than the person casting them. Meeting those expectations will be his greatest challenge. But for now, the symbolism remains powerful. In him, many see Sankara reborn. In him, many see the revival of a vision of Africa that refuses to bow. And perhaps that is why, when the BBC reported on his popularity, they highlighted these historical echoes. Because history matters. The past does not just disappear, it shapes how people see the present. Traoré's rise cannot be understood without Sankar's memory. And that memory gives his leadership a depth and a resonance that few others can match. So, what do we make of this story? A young leader in Burkina Faso rising against the odds, capturing the imagination of millions, drawing praise even from institutions like the BBC, and forcing critics like General Langley to soften their tone. This is not just a story about one man. It is a story about Africa's search for dignity. It is about young people demanding a voice. It is about history's unfinished dreams finding new champions. BBC's recognition matters because it shows that even global media, often accused of ignoring African voices, cannot overlook Traoré's popularity. General Langley's U-turn matters because it shows that even critics cannot dismiss what is happening in Burkina Faso. These are signs of a shifting narrative, a new chapter being written in Africa's story. And Intervlog is here to say, wow, just wow. Because rarely do we see a leader spark such excitement, such debate, and such admiration in such a short time. Rarely do we see someone embody both history and the future at once. Parable. When a river runs long enough, it carves valleys, nourishes fields, and shapes the land itself. Leaders who endure do the same. They carve memory, nourish pride, and shape history. Traoré has become that river. Where it will flow next, no one knows, but already it has changed the landscape. And so, as we close this exploration, we return to the heart of the matter. Why has Traoré captured hearts and minds? Because he speaks to Africa's deepest wounds and highest hopes. Because he embodies a legacy that was left unfinished. Because he stands young, bold, and unafraid in a world that often tells Africans to be silent. That is why the BBC has recognized his rise. That is why even critics are rethinking their stance. And that is why, here at Intervlog, we believe this story is one of the most important unfolding in the world today. History is watching, Africa is watching, the world is watching, and the flame lit by Sankara decades ago now burns again in the hands of a new generation. This is the end of our program today. See you on Intervlog, same time tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to get new video updates. Thank you for watching Intervlog. Thank you. Thank you.